I need to get a tattoo on my head that says U.S. citizen and the date and time.
Hoa Hoang left Vietnam in 1975 as Saigon fell. She was 5 years old and has almost no memory of the war in Vietnam. Her memories of leaving are somewhat hazy.
You know, my mom didn't speak fluent English, so it's not like we knew which town we were in Arkansas. It's not like we knew the name of the refugee camp. It's not like we had a lot of information, and I think when you're a mom, and especially at that point, she was a single mom, and she had 6 of us. So I think her priority was making sure we got fed and that we were safe. And so there wasn't a lot of information.
But she knows she was first taken to Hong Kong, then a refugee camp in Arkansas. Charles Priest, a Mainer who served as a U.S. Navy lieutenant in Vietnam and later in the Maine House of Representatives, sponsored Hoang's family and helped settle them in Sydney. She doesn't remember feeling frightened at first until she began attending grade school.
I remember being in the first grade, and the older kids were real nice to us because we were different, and they treated us like we were dolls, so they'd carry us around. And but I think after the first grade, second grade on was when I started to realize that I'm very different and that people do not want me here, did not like me being here, had a problem with me being here.
As she grew older, she began feeling the resentment more sharply.
Resentment's a nice word. There was outright hatred. We would walk to school, my sister and I, and there'd be a puddle of water from rain, and cars would purposely drive in the puddle as we're walking by to soak us. I mean, it was just, we had people spitting on us. We had kids they would call us every single name that you could think of. And it just was hatred. Like, they hated you. They didn't want you here. They didn't like you. They didn't understand, though, that we weren't communists. We were actually from the southern part of the country, which is the part that wanted democracy.
One of the things Hoang kept from her birth country was the Vietnamese language. Although she learned English as a small child, her mother made sure she was fluent in Vietnamese as well.
You did not step into our house as a child and speak to her in English. Yeah, just didn't do that. You could speak to each other in English, and my sister, who's closest to me, we would do that. But we would do it in our room, or, we would do it with each other. And sometimes what happens is, for me anyways, when you speak a second language, certain words would pop out that were English and certain words would pop out. Like, you'd start the sentence maybe with Vietnamese and then you'd switch over to English and you don't realize you're doing it.
And when Hoang began dating, the two cultures sometimes conflicted.
It was not a good scene. It was a very bad scene because she was very worried about us losing our virtue as females. The males could do whatever they want. My brothers could go out, they could date, And the thing that was tough, too, is that she really wanted us to marry people that were Vietnamese. So, and, from my perspective, I felt like that was reverse discrimination. People talk about us being discriminated against, and yes, we had that happen, but I felt like, okay, Mom, you're doing reverse discrimination now. But that's only because that's all she knew.
Hoang's mother was naturalized at the age of 68.
That was more exciting to me than my own naturalization process, because for me to have gone through school and to have lived here since I was 5 and to speak the language and not be able to get it would have been really disgraceful. But for her to learn English from an adult ed teacher and to take care of all of us and to feed all of us and to clothe all of us and all that, and to make sure that we were safe, and then to get it when she was in her 60s, like, try learning another language when you're in your mid or early 60s, and let me know how that goes.
Hoang also remembers the resistance offered by the interviewer who administered her mother's test.
The gentleman that gave her the test I remember because I was sitting outside the door with her adult literacy volunteer, and Colette is a lovely person, but we were sitting just outside the door, and I hear the interviewer yelling at my mother. Yeah, I was shocked. They don't exactly welcome you through this process. Some of them are, I'm sure they have resentment, and they probably feel like you're coming into my country, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, this guy was from the Lewiston area, and he was yelling at my mother. These questions, he was yelling at her. And he came out and he said, your mother doesn't know any of these questions. She's not understanding anything I'm saying. And I said, okay, well, would you mind if I came in and sat with you? Maybe she's nervous. It's natural to be nervous. And it's not like she took tests on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So, and she's older. I mean, she would have been in her mid-60s or maybe even late 60s. I can't remember exactly. But I could probably figure it out if I did the math. But anyway, so I went in, I sat with her. He's yelling at her. And then she goes to answer and he cuts her off. And so I said to him, I said, because, remember, I'm Americanized at this point. So I'm as direct as the next gal. So I said to him, I said, would you mind not yelling at her, number one? And number two, would you allow her to finish answering questions before you ask her another question? He looked at me and he said, I could take your citizenship away. And I looked at him and I said, no, you can't. So anyways, he did though. He finally asked her the question and then let her answer it. And by golly, she passed.
Hoang has established a career in real estate and now operates her own realty agency in Augusta. When she married, she kept her own name.
And so I was worried because I thought some people may want to work with someone who has a foreign name, and some people may not. And I was pleasantly surprised that most of the people here don't have a problem with it. And so our first year was very successful, in my opinion. And our second year was double successful, I guess, nearly twice the success that we had the first year. So I feel like we're on the right path.
Hoang has never visited the country she was born in. She says she cannot watch documentaries about Vietnam and doesn't want to see the poverty and sadness she would expect to see.
I tell people it was so hard for us to get here that I have no desire to leave. What's the point?
This is Immigrant Voices. I'm Keith Ludden.